Stormwater Stewardship in Sequim. Stormwater is part of the overall water resource system that the city manages every day. The purpose of this show is to introduce some concerns and issues regarding water stewardship in the city, and opportunities as well. This photo shows the corner of Washington and Brown Road 3 years ago when a big storm came along and Bell Creek was already full of irrigation water. Obviously, the creek channel and culverts weren't large enough to contain that water, and the parking lots and roads were flooded. We know this isn't a frequent problem, but when the damage is done, it's a big problem for landowners, including the city. This presentation will cover the historical and physical context, current conditions, and challenges and opportunities. The photo is at the corner of 5th Avenue and 1st Street. The infiltration facility underneath this storm drain cover has filled up, so it's draining in reverse. To set the context, this high elevation perspective shows the Puget Sound watershed. This is the central area here, and includes all lands that drain into Puget Sound and the Strait. Sequim, here, is part of that. Some serious water quality problems in Puget Sound are due to stormwater runoff within this larger area. Those problems are driving many of the regulations we'll talk about in a bit. Closer to home, this view shows the physical setting, literally the ground on which our town was built. Coarse river rock all through here from the ice ages, when the main course of the Dungeness flowed in different paths. This is all former floodplain gravel and cobble, which cut through the fine-grained glacial deposits such as till, as we have in the lower hills and Bell Hill. Now we have the historical context after European settlers arrived. This map shows a few farms and roads from March 1859, 155 years ago. It's a very sparse map. The water features are highlighted, and streams with modern names called out. Here are the modern roads for orientation. Remember, this was drawn in springtime, and yet there's no water indicated in this central area here. In fact, it even says Sequim Prairie. Now we're looking at a map from 1914, 55 years after the last map and 100 years ago still. It has a lot more detail. This shows the streams and wetlands from the last map overlaid. Soon after this time, the drainage ditches were built and irrigation ditches were built. Note that the Highland irrigation system is not yet built. It covers this area. Fast forward to present day roads, and you'll see that the current Bell Creek channel aligns with one of the ditches. So that was how water was managed during the European settlement era, lots of it getting moved all over. And many of those ditches still function to move water. Irrigation water from the river in summer and storm water in winter. This aerial photo is from 2011 with creeks, wetlands, irrigation ditches. These are the blue dashes and dots, and note that the Highland system is built now. The roads are showing to orient you again, and modern-day Bell Creek connecting the two historical ends of Bell Creek. Even now, most of this middle reach does not flow except during storms or if irrigation water from the Highland Ditch is sent down the channel. In conclusion, this is a view looking to the west, straight up Bell Creek. Note Highway 101 here and Bell Hill here. Now we have our town and homes and farms and irrigation ditches, and rainfall isn't so well handled by the natural system anymore. The runoff generated when it can't infiltrate gets a bad name, or stormwater, because it's often too much in one place at one time, or it collects pollutants from roads, yards, and farms. The markings on the photo show the places where runoff may enter a stream directly. Mostly, these are ditches that drain roads and parking lots. Next, we review current conditions, starting with how stormwater is handled in Sequim. The city is currently updating its inventory and map of stormwater facilities. The methods featured here all involve infiltration, called green infrastructure because it's better for the environment than traditional collection systems that pipe stormwater to a treatment plant. That's called gray infrastructure. Sequim is fortunate to have coarse soils that can handle infiltration. These facilities are more traditional. Detention ponds, streets and alleys, which are conveyance features and considered part of the system, and irrigation ditches, also integral to the system. This one is overflowing onto someone's patio. Owners of these facilities, including the city, want to protect their assets, which means maintenance. Street sweeping removes trash and pollutants. Catch basin cleaning, the goal is once per year. Smoke testing, which identifies where stormwater is entering sewer line unexpectedly. Our wastewater treatment plant is a state-of-the-art reclamation facility and not meant to handle the 2 to 3 times increased volume from stormwater. The city is slowly identifying and fixing these inflow connections. But it's not simple, because if you close them off without solving the stormwater problem, it will cause a flood. Another very important aspect to operations involves the relationships the city has with its water management partners, well illustrated in these photos. The top photo shows Roger with Public Works cleaning the storm grate for an irrigation pipe. In summer, this ditch has irrigation water from the Dungeness, but for winter storms, the ditchwalkers close their headgates at the river to prevent the ditches from flooding. So, this facility is owned by an irrigation company, but in winter it carries runoff from Happy Valley and Burnt Hill in the county, all the way through the city to a tailwater outfall at a creek or pond, often in the county. Even though it's runoff originating in the county, city crews help irrigation managers with maintenance like this to reduce flooding of roads and private property in the city. The bottom photo shows a detention pond for the bypass built by DOT. Again, this water is largely runoff from Bell Hill in the county, rather than from the highway itself. Current conditions relative to water quality. In this case, meaning conditions in the environment, not the taste or other conditions of your drinking water. First, for streams. This picture is a screen capture from the state's website. Red indicates water quality impairment in one or more ways. The lower and middle portions of Bell Creek are listed for fecal coliform bacteria, dissolved oxygen, pH, and invertebrates, or the stream bugs that fish eat. The lowest portion of Johnson Creek, not quite showing, is also listed for fecal bacteria at the mouth. In Sequim Bay, some red portions shown here, is listed as well for bacteria. Regarding groundwater quality, remember that Sequim was built on coarse floodplain gravels that infiltrate very well. The county maps these as critical aquifer recharge areas, shown in gray on this map, and groundwater quality is especially vulnerable in these areas. One of Sequim's water sources is directly down gradient from the urban area. Fortunately, these wells are very deep, and the city's supply is well protected from surface contamination, but there are hundreds of private wells out in the urban growth area and the county that aren't so deep. We know from several studies of private wells, some actually inside the city, that nitrates are increasing in the regional aquifer at shallower levels. On this map, yellow arrows indicate groundwater flow direction. Red marks indicate nitrates above 5 parts per million. Background is less than 1. City wells are quite deep, as mentioned on the last slide, and annual tests show background levels only. Ingesting water with nitrates over 10 would be a health concern for infants and those with compromised immune systems. Perhaps most relevant at the moment is that nitrates are like the canary in the coal mine and may indicate when and where other highly mobile contaminants might be present. Most stormwater contaminants are not mobile. A county study in 2010 of 4 shallow private wells detected no significant stormwater contaminants. So, is stormwater causing the water quality problems found in groundwater or our creeks? Sometimes it's hard to determine for sure, but one rule of thumb applies. You can't manage what you don't measure. Monitoring and evaluating data collected by others would be smart, as would outreach and education. In many cases, pollution is prevented by explaining to people how their actions can affect water quality and providing alternatives. Now for stream habitat. This photo is a super wide angle from the corner where Bell Creek goes around Les Schwab Tire Center. It was taken in February. The federal government has designated the lowest parts of Bell and Johnson Creeks as critical habitat for these two species protected by the Endangered Species Act, Puget Sound steelhead and Strait of Juan de Fuca bull trout. It is not clear at this time what the problems with fish habitat are exactly, or whether stormwater is the cause. But the city should participate in answering those questions, because species recovery efforts may be required. Regarding future risk, this slide shows headlines from the New Year's flooding in 1997, when a foot of snow around Christmas was followed by warm rain and rapid melting. The damage to city property was assessed at almost $750,000. A claim form was submitted to FEMA, according to City Council minutes. To be clear, this was an extreme situation, and these are not always avoidable. The goal is to minimize risk and liability. The city has a code with maintenance and reporting requirements for all stormwater facilities, public and private. City crews handle city-owned facilities, but many private owners may not be aware of this code. The photo shows a contractor on a routine monthly inspection of the system at Sequim Village Marketplace. Maintenance and reporting to the city is needed to ensure that stormwater facilities are functioning as they should be. Enforcement of the Stormwater Maintenance Code is also necessary, and the first step is increasing awareness. The city should inform landowners of maintenance codes they need to comply with. The picture shows leakage from a stormwater swale onto the sidewalk. In winter, this can turn to ice, presenting an increased risk of injury. Similarly, as mentioned earlier, flooding due to lack of maintenance can cause damage to both private and public property, which is a cost to all of us. Regarding stormwater regulations. 2 decades ago, stormwater runoff from urban areas was identified as the last major contributor of water quality problems. In the 1990s, the federal government imposed a permitting process on the largest cities around the country, which now applies to smaller cities more and more, such as Port Angeles in 2007. This slide shows page 1 of 4 of permit requirements compared against Sequim's current practices. 32 yellow boxes indicate when the status quo would not meet requirements if imposed. Most of these services regard enforcement, monitoring, outreach, and reporting. Is the city forced to follow permit requirements? Based on current population and density, no. However, if the city is showing good stewardship and there are no stormwater water quality problems, it may be possible to avoid the permitting process regardless of population. Last, a brief summary of challenges as well as opportunities. You may recognize this royalty carriage for the Irrigation Festival. Note the quote from the first days of irrigation still applies today, where water is wealth. Even as runoff percolating into the ground, water adds richness to our quality of life in Sequim. Too bad it doesn't help much with the bills the city has to pay. This shows the 2013 actual expenses and 2014 budgeted expenses, roughly $100,000 for current operations and services. Current capital expenses include the stormwater planning for this year and next. The main point here is that these activities are all currently provided thanks to utility funds, water and sewer, even though the activities are not directly related to the water or sewer systems themselves. Fortunately, for this year and next, grant funds should offset these utility expenses. A little more on costs. This slide indicates the relative expenses for developers from these three periods, shown in rows, at these two stages of development, the two columns. There is a potential fairness issue between landowners in newer subdivisions and commercial properties with annual maintenance costs and those from earlier years, before about 2000, whose facilities were installed privately but are now maintained by the city, often at no expense to the landowner. On the opportunity side, Stormwater Stewardship implements the city's comprehensive plan. Two vision statements regarding stewardship adopted by Council in 2012 are shown on this slide and the next. Good stewardship is expected by City Council, staff, residents, business owners, and visitors. The city is very active, keeping our community safe, clean, healthy. Our wastewater is treated at a state-of-the-art water reclamation facility. Our drinking water comes from deep wells that are managed responsibly. Stormwater is the last piece of the puzzle to bring accountability and stewardship into city operations. Opportunities follow several themes. First and foremost, stormwater is a resource, recharging our water supplies, an amenity to protect. Second, stormwater provides an opportunity to manage water within and between drainage basins. Next, water management methods and activities can be creative, often joining with placemaking and community identity efforts. After all, Sequim cares about water and has ever since the town started. Engaging stakeholders. This is lots of folks: irrigation managers, business owners, homeowners associations, and others. Finally, with proactive management, we may manage our way out of a costly and imposed permit. These photos show examples of stormwater stewardship that enhance the sense of community through public spaces and experience. The alley features permeable pavements to allow infiltration. These curb cutouts allow runoff to enter vegetated swales at the corners. This athletic field is used for stormwater infiltration in the wet season. And the skateboard park also serves as a stormwater detention facility. Integrating public art and design with stormwater management can have multiple benefits. It makes an impression, creates a destination, and most importantly, sparks curiosity and discussion. As people think about the connections between water runoff and water quality, they may in turn take action to protect it. Where exactly is the city in all this? Between 2014 and mid-2015, a master plan is being drafted for council review and adoption. The plan will address the major points of this presentation: stormwater stewardship through infrastructure, inspections, maintenance, water quality, public health, outreach and education, and working directly with partners such as Clallam County and irrigation managers. And the plan will provide options for paying for any new services chosen for implementation. The plan will describe funding options. A new utility would be the conventional approach, but not the only one. There will be public hearings to examine and select levels of service desired, along with associated costs. The City Council will ask for input from residents and other stakeholders at that time, later in 2015. In closing, yes, there are needs, but they are manageable. Yes, there are costs. As with many things, paying sooner is more economical than paying later. The master plan will respond to the city's vision and provides a more predictable future. And yes, Public Works is listening. We want and need to hear from others, to identify problems, help find solutions, help determine how to fund resolution, and help implement. If you haven't yet, sign up for monthly notifications about the project at the city's website. The Surface Water webpage, link shown here, provides further background with links to the 2014 Stormwater Needs Assessment, a photo gallery, videos, and public involvement opportunities. We welcome your input throughout the process of developing the city's stormwater stewardship program.